Okay guys, so you're probably wondering what's up. I'm preparing. Okay guys, so you're probably wondering what's up. I'm preparing to mold that Hulk mask that we've been working on. I went ahead and finished up some of the details to the Hulk mask sculpture we've been working on yesterday after we got off camera, and today we're going to mold the first side. Now this first side takes quite a bit of effort, because what you got to do is you got to take the sculpture and you got to lean it back onto something soft. I put down some clean shop towels. I'm going to cover that with plastic wrap so that the sculpture isn't. As a matter of fact, I kind of want it more like this, so that the sculpture isn't going to pick up the detail from the towels, because when you lean this thing back, the very weight of it is going to impress upon this. So at least with the plastic wrap down, I might have to do some repairs, but it's not going to be as extensive as getting rid of all this patchwork that goes in with the weave of this cloth. So I'm going to cover this with a piece of plastic wrap. Essentially, this is like a pillow for it to sit on. If we leaned it back and laid it straight down on the table, it would literally dent the project. So we don't want to dent it. At least this, there might be a little bit of repairs, but it's not a dent, and we can go ahead and get this taken care of. So the first thing I'm going to do is grab some plastic wrap, and we're going to go from there. I have a little bit of a disadvantage. I'm actually working here at the table. Camera's directly above me, as you can see, and the computer is way over there. It's probably a good 6 feet away. So I'm going to try to look at any kind of comments or questions that you guys might have, but it's going to take me a minute. I'm going to have to do it in between steps. One of the big problems with doing things this way, the slowest, I'm not going to say not big problems, but between steps. Once we lay this down, the first side always takes the longest, because we've got to lay it down, get it positioned. Then we're going to use these 2x4s to kind of like build up some space around it without utilizing too much clay. That just saves you some clay. You'll see all that stuff as I'm working on it. But it's this building of what we call the case line and the retaining wall that takes a long period of time. And the reason you've got to build up the clay. You've got to make the clay wall. There's a lot that goes into it. There's registrations and Primarks and things like that you have to essentially work in as you're building up that retaining wall before you even lay out the first piece of plaster. Sorry, it's kind of one of those overcast days where it's threatening to rain, and they got flies deciding that they want to take refuge under my gazebo. Why am I doing this outside? Don't ask. So, it's one of the first things I'm going to do. Put down that plastic. We're going to lay back the sculpture. Then we're going to build up those blocks of wood. Actually, before even doing that, I'm going to do some trace work on the sculpture itself, so that I have some guidelines to tell me how far I want the parting line between the sculpture and. Between the parting line between the two halves of the mold. It's going to be a two-piece mold. So, all right, so let's go ahead and get to moving. Between the parting line between the two halves of the mold. It's going to be a two-piece mold. All right, so let's go ahead and get to moving. Now, you don't have to use saran wrap from this. You can actually use like a grocery bag, which, after realizing what I just picked up, I should probably just do that. Yeah, this is a pain in the ass. I thought I could reuse something. Grocery bag. Just throwing it out. After realizing what I just picked up, I should probably just do that. Yeah, this is a pain. Okay. I thought I could reuse something. So what I'll use is one of these two bags that I've got covering and protecting the sculpture. I'm not really crazy about the little bit of hash mark in this, so maybe so what I'll use is this bags that I've got covering the way I get sculpture. I'm going to set this down, set it in that spot there. I want to tuck this stuff in because eventually there's going to be blocks of wood built up around this, so I don't want this stuff hanging out where I have to push it out of the way to get the block of wood lined up. You'll see what I'm saying here in a second. Now, because you weren't here for it, I have wrapped this guy up in some plastic bags to protect it. But basically, I've sealed the sculpture with some clear coat, and the clear coat will kind of lock in the moisture from the inside. It's not strong enough to lock it in and leave it outside by itself unprotected, but it is enough that I don't have to wrap it in the towels. I do have the towels down here. That was to essentially protect the base of it because it was drying out as I was sculpting. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take the sculpture and I'm going to draw these lines on it. I know this is off camera. This thing is way heavy, so I want to try to get some of these little lines put in here before. Let me think. I know this is off camera. I want to get one of these lines in, some of these dotted lines in here before I lean it back. But basically, with these lines, what I'm doing is I'm creating a parting line that I can use as a guide. And you basically want to find, the center point so it's equal on both sides. But not every mold is going to be like that. Let me think. Luckily, this is about the case. The only thing that we're going to have to do is we're going to have to dip down around the ears and come back. So the case line will come down and then it'll kind of fan out below and then come straight down, which is kind of typical for any kind of mask that has a human face on it or human style ears. But I know I want these dots and then come straight down, which is kind of typical to indicate any kind of mask that has a human face on it. The division of my creature's mold. Now, when you do this, you kind of want the ear in the, and that's going to come around like that, and then it's going to start again. Right. When you do this, you kind of want the ear. So, you want half the ear to be on one side of the mold and half the ear to be on the other. Unless you're going to cut them off and then, you mold them completely separately, which does tend to happen if you've got a creature with sweeping back ears or big ears like those that elephant mask that I made. So basically, that's what we've got. So I'm going to do this on the other side. Big ears like those elephant masks that I made. I'm going to start here. So I'm going to space these out about every 2 inches. I don't want to draw a solid line because these dots will kind of bleed into the plaster mold and can actually bleed into the latex from there. So if they're dots, they're easier to take care of. They sometimes bleed into the plaster, be covered up with paint, so it's not so much of a worry. But if you did a solid line, it's way harder to hide that solid line than it is a bunch of dots. So, okay, so I'm going to keep this out for me. Take this, so put it inside this line. It's way harder to hide that solid line than it is a bunch of dots. And I've got that non-textured spot facing up. When we get into the mold, as we get into the mold, you guys are going to start to see why custom masks are so incredibly expensive. there is a shit ton of labor that goes into this. It's not just the shit ton of labor that went into the sculpture itself, it's the labor that's now about to go into the mold that almost supersedes all else. This is a back-breaking, thankless task, and you know, I do have people that I know that actually enjoy it. Sometimes I can get in the mode and enjoy it, but basically we're talking about a process that you're leaning over and you're building and working on, and your back starts to kill you, and you know, you're mixing up plaster, you're putting down layers. And then you've got to separate the two mold pieces and clean out all the clay. It is an incredible pain in the ass. Back starts to kill you. You know, you're mixing up plaster, you're putting down layers. And then you've got to separate the two mold pieces and clean out all the clay.
So I'm going to tip this thing back.
Lean it back on that piece there. Now I've got the armature anchored into this platform, and that's kind of for stability's sake. And I've got a bunch of these cut up 2x4s that I use to take up the space of clay. And oops, for stability's sake, I've got a bunch of these. You really got to pay attention when you're doing this, because cut up 2x4s that I nothing will to piss you off more than essentially, you know, finishing a sculpture and then ending up denting it because with a piece of wood or something. So put that in here. I try to get as far as possible. I don't want to touch this stuff, but with the I don't want to touch my sculpture if I can help it. I try not to get as far as possible. And actually, at this point, I'm actually hoping I have enough wood for this. I don't know why you'd be getting an echo, Randy. Unless the gain got turned up for some reason. I don't know. I usually have the gain turned down, but it could have been moved. There shouldn't be an echo. There's only one speaker being utilized. One microphone being utilized. Usually have the gain turned down, but it could have been moved. There shouldn't be. There's only one speaker being utilized. Okay, Randy, are you, I don't have the speaker on because I didn't want the feedback. If you're not hearing it anymore, it's probably because this laptop I'm using, every time I turn the damn thing on, it decides to use the microphone as a speaker. So that might have been what you were hearing. Hopefully it's stopped. Can you double check, Randy? Okay, cool. That's what it was. The damn laptop was trying to use use the microphone as a speaker while using it as a microphone. But okay. So it is freaking hot as hell. It's 104 degrees. I know that, like Randy's probably telling me, shut the hell up. You know, it's humid here in Texas. I don't know. Does it get humid in Lubbock? I don't remember. When I was living in Clovis, New Mexico, when I was stationed there, I don't remember it being humid, but maybe. Like I said, I'm just positioning these blocks to help. There's still going to be a huge amount of clay buildup, like way more than's typical. Okay. So that's going to do that. Okay. Try to move that. So right now, I've got some water droplets on here from it being under the plastic bag. And Randy, if you just tuned in before I went through, the laptop is like 6 feet away, so I'm only going to be able to sporadically check out comments, so I apologize if I don't get to something that you might have posted. A 102 freaking degrees, man. Yeah, I didn't think there was any humidity over there. But talking to Jessica, she's down in Houston, and it's apparently equally as hot with all the rain. So she'd be telling me, shut the hell up. Stop your whining. You guys might be wondering about the jacked up teeth. I am not keeping those. I'm going to sculpt those separately, mold them separately, and get them inserted. I will use this understructure to essentially create the right size so that they go in properly. Because I like the size. I'm not crazy about the cheap ass way they were done. They were just a placeholder. So in case you're wondering. So I'm opening up my bucket of clay. Okay. So the only way to get this done was, I only have the one camera for now. I figured you get more visual of me building out the case line from an above view rather than a side view where you can only ever see one side at a time. Because once I start messing with the clay and the plaster and all that, I'm not going to want to touch my camera at all. So, so I apologize that you guys, for this particular one, you guys will only have the one angle. So right now, I've probably got way more. I could probably fit a bunch more 2x4s in here if I had them. And I may go looking for them in a second. I thought a bucket of 2x4s would have been enough. But I've got probably about that much space between the 2x4 and that line that I drew. So I want to make sure that that I build that up a little bit more, especially here. So down here where the ear dips down, this is fine. But everything else needs to be raised, or else I'm going to end up running out of clay real fast. But I'm covering this stuff with the clay. And actually, before I actually get too involved in this, I think I'm going to go grab those 2x4s. They're a couple of feet away, so it might take me a second to dig them out. So just kind of like bear with me for a second. I'll be right back. So hopefully I found a couple of things that'll work out equally as well. I'm going to replace some of these with this 4x4 and build it up from there. Now, granted, this is only going to help me on the one side. So thank God I've got 4 more 4x4s over there. There. Check it further away. Okay. This one. That's going to be a little rough. Trying to get some of the old latex debris off of here. These ones haven't been used in a while. As I'm sure you can plainly see. You see, this one is a solid piece. Okay. These are basically just scrap pieces that I've had laying around for years. See, that just fits under that ear. Awesome. Got just enough clearance there. But the cool thing is now I've freed up all these pieces of wood. Here's something that typically comes into play. It's an utter pain in the ass when you have these little sinkholes and you need something to fill it. The last thing you want to do when you're pushing in clay is to have this damn hole there that is rocking the entire structure that you're building. There's 1,000,001 ways to do this. So the way I'm showing you is not the end all. Let's see. Cool. So yeah, there's a lot of ways to do this. I can already see that there's something going on. How the hell I always end up doing that? I always mount the armatures. I must be like lopsided in my brain because I always end up mounting the damn armature slightly cocked off to the side. So now I'm looking at it and it's not quite, it's sort of like it's turned a little bit this way. So I'm trying to find little things to help shim it up. That seems to have done. Okay. Oh shit. I hate mold days. Okay. I'm gonna drop this one down because it's rather small. Thought I could leave that on there, but it's probably going to end up being a bad idea. Now, you probably wouldn't guess by watching me in this mode of frustration trying to do this, but I have probably built 200 molds or better. I'm sure way more than that over the years. So it's always one of those things where you think you're ready to go, and then boom. Something's a setback. Okay, this isn't optimal So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a piece of cardboard and hot glue that cardboard down so it kind of covers that. Gives me a little bit of a firm platform to build on. I think that's actually not so bad now. You never want to have a piece jetting out like this unless you cut it, because if you bump this, you're either going to damage the sculpture or lift up the retaining wall. I'm sorry, not the retaining wall, but the case line, and you don't want that. So I guess I have to have an option to cut one of these up. I don't know about this side. I think I probably do. So, yeah, I mean, that can go there. See, there's already, I can tell one of these little pieces of wood is warped. Yeah, it's this one. It's actually bowed. So I'm just trying to set it where it's not going to wobble as much. Okay, so now we've got this. I guess I can just go like this. Ouch. This. Cool. Actually, that might be better. Yeah, this is all kinds of gloriously exciting, I know. I apologize. But believe it or not, this is the process. It's about like this each and every time, just so you know. And anyone who's taken one of my classes can attest to that. Okay. Cool. So, I mean, I think I'm just gonna make that out of clay. I don't think I'm gonna go bust out the saw to try to cut down a couple of pieces when at least I've reduced the mass amount of clay that I've got to use. It's twisted to the side. Randy, you got issues, man. So, get this plugged in. Hot glue gun fired up. It is, if you can get away with doing this outside, it is definitely best. Some of the stuff that I'm going to have to deal with while I'm building this out is plaster dust. Plaster dust, you don't want to breathe that stuff, because once you add liquid to plaster, it then kicks it off and it starts to harden. If you're breathing that stuff in, your lungs are essentially moist on the inside. That plaster dust hits that, and what's going to happen? It's going to solidify in there. You don't want that crap in your lungs. So always wear a mask. Do this outside. And the other thing is when you're mixing plaster, make sure you've got gloves on, which I will, because that plaster will leach the water right out of your skin. So let's see. Geez, on a day like this, you'd think that it would be quicker to get warm. Now, as I'm looking at the sculpture, I'm seeing some stuff down here that were problematic, mainly because of the size of the sculpture, how far it hung down to the base, and the fact that I wasn't able to see it from the angle I was at. So there are very few little spots, but I want to get these, kind of covered up and blended in. I'm actually going to be doing a lot of foam fabrication under this guy's chin, so I'm not horrifically worried about this stuff down here, but I just want to kind of just clean it up for my own senility. Senility. Let me see this side. There's a little bit of a plug here. Cool. This is like typically one of the most forgotten about areas of a mask. This behind the ears, and if you're not paying close enough attention to what you're doing, sometimes a lot of people will just disregard the back of the head because they don't think that anyone's going to be paying attention to the back. Well, I'm willing to bet 50% of the time people are going to be looking at the back. Get some water in my spray gun. All right, basically set to start doing this. I'm just going to try to get those cardboard pieces on there. Looks like the gun is heating up, so. So, got my razor blades. Cut off. There's my marker. Trying to get an idea of the shape. Okay. Lovely. So that is probably good there. All right. So I know that I need glue here. Okay. Sometimes you can actually even glue the pieces of wood so that they don't move. And sometimes I do that, but there's one thing that you're going to have to worry about is when you take those things out, sometimes you need to be able to pull them directly away, and you don't want them to be inhibited by something, because you don't want to rock it back and forth to pull it out, because every time you rock it, you take the chance of smacking your sculpture. You definitely don't want to do that. Okay, so we got that one in place. It's pretty much just riding the line. I'm going to do another one right here. Let's see. This way, kind of like an origami thing going on. Okay, so that should be good. Okay, just gonna hold those into place until it's time to start laying that stuff out. Here's a safety tip. When you're using razor blades, make sure you're not trying to work too fast. I nicked my damn finger, and I had to go throw some super glue on it off camera because I'm a dumbass. Okay, so I think I might actually add a little bit of glue to this one. As much as I hate doing it, I feel like it might be necessary. I'm just putting that there for weight so the glue has a chance to cool off. And we're about to do this to the other side, so you need a couple more pieces of cardboard. So I'm basically just doing the exact same thing here as this one, because it's not so messed up. I'm going to just kind of use the guideline of the head. To get the curve I need to cut out. And the razor blade's over there. So. I see some comments popping up. Randy's probably making fun of me for cutting my finger. Yeah. A lot of people don't even realize that that's kind of what it was developed for. I used to use it in the military all the time. I mean, you don't exactly want to use it to seal up a gunshot wound, but you know, it's you gotta do what you gotta do. Okay, so that's good. Field stitches. Okay. But you see, this is basically just kind of like filling in that void so I don't have to worry about the clay hitting it. I do have to worry about is denting my goddamn ear here. Where's that razor blade? So I'm going to have to make a mental note when I flip the sculpture. Fix that ear. this. Of course I can fix it right now. There is going to be a lot of things that you're going to have to keep in the back of your head while you're flipping these things back and forth. One, double checking to make sure there's no damage before you start to mold, because sometimes you just get into that mindset where you just, you know, you're in mold making mindset, you're no longer in sculpting mindset, and so if, you know, there could be a ding that you don't even realize. So basically, I need to do that. Glue gun is starting to give up the ghost. It won't push the glue stick. There we go. Now it's starting to do its goddamn job. Okay. This is going to go like this. Basically, now I can go ahead, right after this is done, I'm probably just going to do a really quick seal up with some acrylic spray, kind of waterproof it, because the clay has water in it. And I don't want to work this any more than is necessary, because eventually the glue will break free. I've already got a coat of this on here, so I think we're good and sealed up. If you're doing this and you put this coat on, don't get the glossy spray. Get the matte spray, because the matte spray is going to, it's still going to happen, but it's not going to be as bad. When you start to put the plaster on here, it's going to start beating up, because essentially you've made this waterproof. And it's going to take a lot of work to work those beads into an actual coverage. If it's glossy clear coat, then it'll make it that much harder. I mean, it's already going to be hard enough. There's no sense in making it harder on yourself. Okay. Where I'm going with what? The cardboard? So, Randy's asking me where I'm going with this. I'm assuming that he's talking about the cardboard and blocks. But what I'm doing is I'm using this to help reduce the amount of clay I have to use to build up this retaining wall for the mold. Randy has a copy of my book, all of my books actually. And it suggests this in the mold making section, just to kind of like help remind you of what I'm doing. Basically, now I'm going to cover all this stuff with clay so that I can smoothen it out to create this really, really nice retaining wall. Retaining wall. I keep saying retaining wall. I do not mean retaining wall. I mean case line. Case line is basically just the separation of the two halves of the mold. Kind of getting a bit of a breeze around here. That's going to suck. Breeze indicates drying the surface of the clay, and that indicates cracking. We don't want no crack around here. Randy's like, yeah, I'll get the book and look. Yeah, there's that whole section on the case line and the clay buildup. What we're going to be doing, if I haven't already specified, we are going to be making a plaster mold of this sculpture. Plaster is going to be heavy, especially in this case. This is a big mold, and the plaster is going to be, you know, there's going to be a lot of it. So it's going to be a heavy mold. So moving it around is not going to be a fun task. But because we're using it to make a latex mask, we need plaster to get there. Plaster, it's sort of like slip when you're working with pottery. Slip goes into a plaster mold. The plaster leaches out the moisture from the slip, and then the slip. Then the slip, you know, starts to form a skin because it's dried out in that area, and the skin becomes the cup or the bowl or whatever you're using the mold to create. The same thing is true for the latex version. It's still creating a skin because the latex is the moisture in the latex is being leached out into the mold, and it creates a skin with the latex, and then the skin is what ends up becoming the base of your mask. So if you were going to try to make latex, let's just put it this way, plaster is about the only thing that you can use to get the same result. I mean, if you wanted to cast this in, say, a urethane, if you're making a urethane mask, which, you know, it could have the same properties as latex. You could use a fiberglass mold. Problem with urethane is you've got to slosh cast it, which means you got to hold the mold and slosh that stuff around. Because with latex, this is all going to be a void. So it's going to pour into the neck, fill up the head, and I can fill it all the way to the top and leave it. As soon as I'm ready, as soon as I feel like enough water has been leached out of the mask, I can turn it upside down and dump off the excess latex into the bucket to then use it for another time. Urethane, you have to pour just enough urethane in part B and part 2 to slosh that around that mold. And keep doing it until the urethane is cast, because if you don't, you're gonna have a puddle of it, and the last thing you want to do is slosh that thing around and dump off all the excess, because that's all waste. It's gonna cure, and once you mix A and B together, it's only a matter of time before it cures. So you've wasted a ton of materials. Latex is just that much easier to work with because, you know, it doesn't require an A and B, and you can use what you pour off later for another mask. So I prefer using, when making this type of mask, I prefer using latex, and so therefore I know that this is going to be a hateful, heavy plaster mold. But I knew that going in. I mean, you could create like as if you were working on a silicone mask, and create a core for it. But that core should probably be collapsible because urethane isn't going to be as forgiving and peel off and stretch the way you want it to get it off the core. So why not just save yourself a shitload of time and use the latex? I mean, all kinds of special requirements needed for you know, painting, you know, urethane and stuff. So, you know, especially if you're just getting started, why drive yourself crazy? So, build this up. I mean, there's no sense in creating more work for yourself, but this is all R&D. So this is stuff that I've learned over the years of doing this. It's like, okay, well, the last thing I want to do is, you know, at this point, is create wasted materials that I could be using for something else. Urethane has its place, even in mask making, but you know, unless you're prepared for, you know, the needs of that product, you know, latex is the easiest to work with when you're just getting started. Silicone is also, you know, pretty easy, pretty user-friendly, as long as you know what to do. You do need to have a mold with a core to be able to pour a silicone mold, I'm sorry, a silicone mask. But you can't paint on silicone without using a silicone paint. Oh, so right now, Randy's telling me that I'm a distraction. I can live with that. Got a little bit of overhang with some of the cardboard. Time is probably going to keep me from being able to do everything I want to do on camera today. You really kind of, once you get the case line built, you want to get on that first side of the mold. You want to get that done as soon as possible, because you don't want the clay to dry out, which I can already feel the clay kind of getting a little more. I can feel the material change just in the short time it's been out of the bucket. So once you start, you really want to be prepared to be able to finish the entire side. You don't want to put, so, and we'll get into this, but you don't want to do like the 4 layers of the plaster. You don't want to do 1 and walk away for the night. You don't want to do 2 and walk away from the night. You want to do all 4 layers, because once you pour the first one, it's important that you continue on and see the process through. You don't have to do the second side until the next day, but you damn sure have to finish the first side. The reason for that is, I told you about the plaster leaches water out of the latex. That's why we use it for latex mask making. But in thin layers, the clay will leach water out of the plaster. And so if you've only got 1 layer and it's paper thin of that plaster, because you've done 1 or 2 coats, what it'll do is overnight the clay will shrink just a little bit, because it's thirsty for water, and so it's pulling the water out of the plaster. So when you come in the next day to put the next layer on and you give just the slightest amount of pressure, the whole thing shatters like glass. But the problem then becomes, you can't just pick the glass up. Sorry, you can't just pick the glass out of the damn, off and start again. You literally have to resculpt everything, because you're going to be picking plaster parts out and just completely obliterating your sculpture. So always, 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 if you're going to start working on a mold, be prepared to finish that first one. Unplug that. I'm done with the hot glue gun. And actually, to help keep things from drying out, because this is such a big mold. This case line is going to be rather large. I'm going to go ahead and keep this side moist as long as I possibly can. Some towels. So, hey Randy, when you get a chance, if you could pop the link up to your Twitch channel, so these guys can check you out later on. Randy does this really amazing work with leather, and he's been on Twitch for a while, so he's got a good following, and he's just got some incredible work. I mean, you'd have to see it to believe it. He's got this Thor hammer that just incredible. Even the wood pieces aren't wood, they're leather. So I mean, he is a leather sculptor. I mean, it's fantastic. Randy and I have known each other for a while. I don't know if I can say if he was a fan and that's how we met, or if it was just one of those things where he just happened to hear, you know, he just happened to meet me at a Comic-Con in Dallas. I was Dallas All-Con. But right after the show that I was on, at Jim Henson's Creature Shop Challenge, I met him the following year at a Comic-Con, and we've kind of gotten to know each other over the years. I got to know his wife and his daughter, and you know, he's pretty cool. The whole family cosplays. They're all exceptionally talented, and every year he brings a new project to Dallas All-Con when I'm there, and shows me what he's been working on. Last year was that, or this past Comic-Con was that Thor hammer. I think it was. I don't know if, maybe that was Lubicon that you showed me the Thor hammer. Maybe it wasn't Dallas. So again, if you're just popping in, I'm building up the clay case line for a mold that I'm about to do of this Hulk sculpture. I got something screwing around over here by the side of my garage. I think it's that damn squirrel. I keep hearing something move over there, and yesterday I thought it was the finches playing in the bird feeder, but I'm willing to bet now that it's that damn squirrel. So I continue to add clay, build up this case line in a mad rush to work as fast as I can before the clay itself starts to dry out. Yeah, I think it was Lubicon that you showed me that Thor hammer. Actually, it's not the Thor hammer. It was the new one, because the hammer got destroyed. So you created the new version, I think. But yeah, no problem. I mean, the least I can do is you know, send some people to your channel. I mean, it's all about the community, man. So this is a little more damp, but I can tell it all kind of starts out this damp. But by the time I get around, I can feel the material changing in my hands. And so there is a lot about the mold making process that you need to know if this is something you're going to do on your own. And there are tons of books out there that can help you through it, tons of videos out there that can help you through it. But if you get the chance, and you're on Amazon, I do have my book, Latex Mask Making, on Amazon. And it breaks down what I'm doing here in detail, and also tells you the things that you should avoid, like undercuts and things. It's hard to show an example of an undercut in this video because of the fact that I'm stuck with one camera. My hands are covered in filth. I don't want to touch the camera because I don't want to functify it. Get this damn thing in here. Okay, so we're basically got the coverage that we need. There's still just a couple of just little oddities that need to be addressed, but at least the bulk of the coverage of the case line is done. This. Now I'm going to start kind of squeezing, delicately squeezing some clay into areas of the, because I don't want plaster leaching underneath the sculpture. And getting plaster on the second side or on the back side before I'm ready to do it myself. And here is an opportunity for an undercut. So what I'm doing is I'm building an angle away. So it's kind of like a U shape, but the U has these wide sides instead of a U kind of being a little parallel and down. We want it to be a wide, open U. Got a damn fly buzzing around my microphone. At least he's not buzzing around me. So once you get the clay, case line built, or laid out, we'll put it laid out, we'll call it laid out. You're then going to want to take a sculpting tool and work as closely to the sculpture as possible, as much clay as you can, because you want it to butt up against the sculpture. Without leaving any opening where plaster can leach in between this part of the mold and the other side. When it comes to mold making, I personally feel like the plaster molds are the easiest. My favorites to build are the fiberglass molds for like things like silicone and urethane and stuff. Just because there's this more of a zen quality to what you're doing. sure people would disagree with me. We all have our own, you know, preferences. I mean, my favorite material to work with is definitely latex, but close second is fiberglass. So crap, we got another wind build up. So I'm trying to get this structure built. I can already feel that clay getting hard. For the ear. I'm sorry, building this structure up so that it's touching the sculpture without really changing. This is kind of like the delicate part. It's almost like surgery. It's you want to touch the sculpture without, you know, messing up the sculpture or making the retaining wall part of the sculpture. Lots of tool cleaning because the clay builds up on the tools and it ends up not being a nice flat piece of equipment. It's actually becomes this mess of multiple edges and surface space. Going around the ears are always like the rough part. There's no certain tool you need, you just need to be patient. But you're going to do this all the way around. So, and right now I can already feel my back telling me, go to hell. Go to hell, you son of a bitch. Clean up all this. Now, this area is going to turn into a tunnel, which is the latex, I've said a million times now, is going to go into to fill up this void. I could cut it off right here, but I want to make sure I've got enough area here, so I'm probably going to build out the mold to about here. It is going to add some more weight and require some more material, but I want this thing to be perfect. Because with the mold, once the mold's done, man, you cast as many goddamn pieces as you want, you know. So you suffer through the mold because it gets you what, you know, it gets you that ability to make as many copies as you want. So as much as I hate the mold making process, I do have that in my head the whole time. Once this is done, I don't have to do it again, unless I screw up. You know, that's the caveat. That's right there. You know, unless you screw up, and I have. There was actually no, that wasn't a screw up. That was I mean, I have screwed up, don't get me wrong. But I am not, you know, even 20 years of doing this, I still, actually, I think sometimes the more you've done it, the more, you know, complacent you get. and the more apt you are to make a mistake because you think you know everything that you're doing, you know, and you've got this level of confidence that you probably shouldn't have. So, but I was just thinking as I was about to tell you a story about when I worked on this werewolf project and had to make multiple molds, but it wasn't because I messed up the mold. It was because we had many variations of this creature, and while one mold could have done it, the fact that each variation required a different type of material, it wasn't something that we could easily, you know, just say, hey, we're going to do it in latex, or hey, it's going to be silicone, or hey, it's going to be urethane. Because of price, really. So you have to know what you're going to cast your stuff in and have that mold specifically for that stuff. So if you're casting silicone, making like a silicone mask or something like that, you can never put latex in that mold, because some things like latex, what the hell, suddenly got a little bit of a monsoon brewing. What was I saying? If you cast latex, okay, let's put it this way, silicone doesn't play well with other stuff, so latex is one of them. The sulfur in the latex, some other chemicals, will actually retard the curing of the silicone, so you'll ruin a mold. So you have to create a mold for the silicone one, you have to create a mold for the latex one, and you have to create a mold for the other stuff that you want to cast in. So we had one that was resin, I believe, so that required a silicone mold, and then we had one that was silicone, that was for the animatronic skin. That was a fiberglass mold, and then a plaster mold for the latex. And so we had to sculpt the damn creature exactly the same multiple times. I'm gonna put this down on here just because this wind is pissing me off. Keep it from drying out. So this is not perfect. I'm going to go to the other side and start working some of that. Dampen another towel. Take it with me. Check out the comments while I'm there. I've erred, yes. I have erred. Yeah, I have made mistakes. I have made lots of mistakes. That's why it's been 20 years. It's been a learning process. Unlike a lot of artists that are coming up in Hollywood, guys who have been able to go to the cinema school of makeup cinema school, or something to that effect. That stuff wasn't around when I was a kid. Neither was YouTube. So I had to learn everything on my own. There wasn't even books, really. I mean, everything that we're learning today that people were sharing information about was basically top secret in the industry, because nobody wanted, you know, any competition. Once you learned how to do something, why share it with anybody? It was basically a mindset. So guys like me who are coming up, who didn't have access to a school in rural Pennsylvania, basically had to learn by studying pictures that we had seen in things like Fangoria magazine and stuff. And I probably spent tens of thousands of dollars learning, you know, what I could do, what I couldn't do, and why I couldn't do it. So I'm completely self-taught, even though I do have friends that have, you know, kind of shared secrets with me and stuff over the years, and I've, you know, through, you know, learning, trial and error, I've kind of shared my stuff with them. You know, this little era of technology that we have is just incredible, and I wish to hell when I was a kid this stuff was available. I actually had a scholarship to the Art Institute of Pittsburgh when I was younger, so I could have gone and done some special effects stuff, you know, there. But my grandfather scared the shit out of me. Told me that, you know, artists don't make any money, and he's pretty much right. I mean, we get treated like crap when it comes to the service that we provide because people don't see it as as having value. Oh, well, you're having fun, so why should I pay you? You know. So, you know, he kind of scared the crap out of me. So I gave up the opportunity and joined the military for. I ended up staying for 10 years, and you know, didn't get back into this until after I separated. And then he's trying to get me again to become an accountant or something. It's like, there's always work in accounting. Like, I'm not doing that. Damn, it's like I gave 10 years of my life to the service. I'm going to do what I want to do. And so I started, you know, working on the special effects stuff and started catching my first movie breaks, and I started from there. But even with those movie breaks, you know, you had to learn that, you know, anytime anybody's asking you to do stuff for exposure sake, that they have essentially they want to make their project and make whatever they can off of it at your expense. So, and while there is some projects that I've been willing to do that, you know, I mean, I think it should be a personal choice. I think if you feel a project merits it and you like what they're doing and you're willing to give up the fact that if they make money, it's bloody unlikely that you're going to get paid anyway, but you like the concept and it's something you want to be a part of, then, you know, by all means, you know. But telling young artists that your cell phone movie is going to be exposure for them is ridiculous. Hell, even now, I've been on international television. I was on a television show about special effects. I've written books about it. I've done, you know, just as many Hollywood blockbusters as I have indie films. And still, I get people telling me, you know, well, you can do this for, you know, for exposure. It's like, how much more exposure do you think I need? I mean, not to be arrogant, but at some point you got to be like, hey, I think I've exposed myself enough. So again, I'm sort of just going around these areas with the retaining wall, sorry, not the retaining wall, the case line touches the sculpture, and tightening that up with a really good seal at the same time, not damaging the sculpture itself and all the work that I put into it. Cover that up. Move over here for a few minutes. Kind of got some chunkiness going on. Build up this side a little more. Yeah, exposure is ridiculous. Hey, yeah, when it comes to the military, man, yeah, I don't regret that at all. I mean, I kind of, wish I hadn't given up the opportunity at the Art Institute, but I don't regret my military service. I did learn a lot. I had a lot going on. Traveled the world, literally traveled the world. Got to live in 17 different countries. It was just incredible. Yeah, so I mean, I totally don't regret that at all. It's funny. The one thing, it is kind of a shady business. Mainly the recruiting aspect. My cousin was going into the military at the same time I was. We were pretty tight. She was going into the Army, and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. Just know my grandfather was pushing me, but I wanted to make sure I was in the branch that I was going to actually enjoy. And and at that point, I wasn't even sure there was an enjoyment level. But she's pushing the Army really hard. And it's just like, God, what the hell is in it for you that, you need me to finally buckle down and, indefinitely go with the Army? Well, I'll tell you what was in it for her. A $500 bonus if she suckered one of her friends or family into signing up before she went off to MEPS. Little asshole. so yeah. Sorry, I thought I turned off my ringer. But yeah, so yeah, it's a crooked business. Maybe all industries have a level of being crooked. Yeah, so you can see I'm kind of cleaning things up. I'm just smoothing out the case line. And the reason why you want it to be nice and smooth is you want the mold to fit together nice and tight. You're going to have registration marks laid in here that are going to make it so that you can make sure that there's no sliding of the two parts. But for the most part, any extra, clumpiness is really just going to essentially create an unstable, merging of the two parts of the two mold halves. So once we get this done, I'm going to seal it up with some clear coat. Move on to the retaining wall. Yes, I do mean retaining wall this time. keep forgetting about my damn fingernails. Get too close to the sculpture, and even the slightest growth on a fingernail will gouge your sculpture. So ladies, I do not know how you do this with long fingernails. I mean, those of you who have them, I do have friends in the industry with incredibly long fingernails, and it's like, how in the hell do you work on this stuff with those damn nails? I mean, I swear to God, I've got the slightest length to a fingernail, and it just gouging the shit out of each one of my sculptures. It's like, what the fuck? How can you do that? Coffee break. And back to work. Okay, so basically, I'm looking around. It appears that I have attached in all areas that I needed to attach. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to further smoothen that before moving on to the other aspects. So I'm going to smoothen it down with some water and a paintbrush. Okay, so over here, what the hell time is it? Okay. Son of a bitch! These little threads from the towels. Double checking to make sure I don't have anything that could resemble an undercut. My phone's yelling at me, telling me I've got comments from Facebook. Randy, is that you? Just trying to smoothen this case line out a little bit more. Clean up the gear as I go. I've got a little divot here that could stand some repair. So you want at least 2 inches away from your sculpture, and the reason for that is, you know, you want room to be able to put things down in there, but at the same time, the more surface space that you can squeeze, you know, squeeze these 2 mold halves together, the better. At the same time, you know, there is a point where essentially you're just wasting material and making your mold heavier than it needs to be. But 2 inches is a good you know, barometer for that. We have, this is probably one of the smaller sides. This is about 2.5. Once I add the retaining wall, it's going to take up about that much more space. So you just want to give yourself some space to work. So I had a little piece of sponge somewhere, but now I can't seem to find it. Waiting for this weather to decide it's gonna rain, and then I'm gonna be on one of those Twitch gone wrong videos, because the rain's gonna be pouring down on my laptop and be like, son of a bitch. Randy, you still there? I haven't heard a comment in a while, or read a comment in a while. I wish that you could set this up so you could hear the comments. I'm sure there's a way, it's beyond me at the moment. So you didn't have to read, you could actually hear the conversation going on. That would be optimal. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead. Not on Facebook now. Gotcha. So there is a slim possibility I may not make it to Dallas AllCon this year, which is gonna suck because I love that con. Like it's. I do it for free. I mean, for flight and hotel. I mean, just fly me out and put me on Celebrity Row and I'm good to go. You know, I mean, just, you know, that's how much I love that show. I mean, everybody else, you know, basically charge about $1,200 to $1,500 for an appearance fee. But that show I do for free because I love it. It's an awesome show, and I might actually miss one for the first time in 6 years, and that will suck. You already have tickets to Dallas All. Well, you're like a Christ. You're as much of a as a regular at AllCon as I am. No, the reason I told you, I think I told you why I might miss it, didn't I? So that's nice and smooth out. Fantastic! So the reason why I might miss it is, I'm gonna cover this too. There's no sense in exposing my work to the wind if it's unnecessary. So real quick before I get into that, Randy, we're gonna do what we call registration keys. I'm going to lay those out in key, locations. I'm going to probably put one here. What you do to one side, you do to the other side. So here, and probably in the center. So that means there's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And really, the one in the center, you're doing to both sides anyway. So, but anyway, so back to the reason I might not be at the AllCon, which is killing me. So my wife and I have been married for 13 years, and early on in our relationship, she had this doctor's appointment, and they told her that basically she was unable to have kids, and I don't think it really bothered her all that much. She wasn't one to essentially be a parent. So for 13 years, we go on our happy way. I send my youngest kid off from a previous marriage. I have 2 kids from a previous marriage. I send my youngest off to college 2 years ago, and then right after the Comic-Con that I own, she starts getting morning sickness, and it was like, is that morning sickness or is that just sick? So Jamie is pregnant, freaking the hell out. I'm trying to figure out how the hell that happened. It's like, you just get it in your head that, that's not something you have to worry about. 13 years is a long time. So yeah, I may not be coming because my child will be born, they're thinking about March 7th through between the 7th and the 10th, sometime in there. We find out a little more on Friday. This wind is going to end up causing me to have to shut down a little early, which is fine because we've got all this stuff laid out. As long as I keep it moist and covered, everything will be good. But anyway, so he or she, we don't know yet, will probably be due around March 7th to the 10th. And since HulkCon is like the weekend after, I don't know if my marriage will survive me leaving a brand new mom with no experience, alone with an infant, while I go off to sign autographs and hang out with my buddies. Yeah, that's just one of them things that I was not planning on ever having to have happen. Okay, so I am starting to see some rain, and since I don't have any real protection from the rain, I'm going to go ahead and close up. What I'm going to do is, I've actually created this, I got this tarp here, and I did this on purpose just in case something like this were to happen. So I've got the clay all set up, and I'm going to put all these wet towels down to help keep it, you know, moist. And then I'm going to take this tarp and I'm going to wrap it around both ways, and then this way, so that it keeps the wind off of it, so it's not drying out. And then I'll be able to come back in the morning, live stream the rest of the thing. This was going to take more than one live stream anyway. I had hoped that I might be able to get at least the first layer on here before we had to the first side done before we had to cut the camera, but that's fine. This is actually a really good place to start. I mean, to stop, because once I start laying that plaster, I can't stop. So with the weather playing the way it is, I don't want to be in a situation where it caused potential damage to the project that I worked so hard on. So I'm going to go ahead and bug out, but Randy, I appreciate you hanging out. Everybody else who popped in to watch, I appreciate your participation. If you guys have any questions, as always, just go ahead and shoot me an email. I will real quick, let me stream that across. So if you look down here at the counter, which is for some reason, I swear to God, it's always something with stream knobs, you know. Here's my ticker. Where the hell is the ticker? Why is it doing this to me? See, this kind of shit really pisses me off, because look at this, it's going to go all kinds of... Okay, I apologize for the ticker. I'm going to figure out why it's doing what it's doing. It was fine yesterday, nobody touched it, and suddenly it's a problem. So if you have any questions, you want to follow me on social media, I'm at let me see, if on facebook.com/escape.design is my personal handle. It's actually under Russ Adams, but I think the link is escape.design, and then on Instagram it's at AdamsRuss. So feel free to to connect with me there. Also, if you want to get me by email, it's admin, so ADMIN at escape and then -design.com. So, or you can just look me up on my website, escapedesigneffects.com, and my website will be, my email will be right there. So if you have any questions about what we were doing, you need some advice on a project you're working on or thinking you're going to be working on, definitely shoot me a message. Good God, there's only been like 2 tornadoes in the 25 years that I've lived in Utah, and I swear to God, it's looking like it's going to want to be one today. So I'm just joking. I don't think you have to worry about it. Anyway, the tornadoes in Utah are nowhere near Texas standards. Like it's barely a Category 1. It's mostly a dust devil, but it gets classified as a tornado. So anyway, so I'm gonna go ahead and cut out. Thank you guys for popping in. Please subscribe if you haven't, and shoot me a message if you have any questions on things and stuff. Randy, I will talk to you later. Everybody go to Randy's Twitch stream and check him out. He's got some amazing stuff going on.